Hi, welcome to Breaking Free of Codependency. My name is Linda Forrest, and I work as a muse, a writer, and a public speaker. And ultimately, what I do is I help people to shift patterns of behavior, not by addressing the behavior or even the pattern, but by addressing the brain function that causes the behavior or pattern. So going to this route gives us much faster results in being able to shift these things that we might otherwise take years trying to conquer. So what we're doing today is this is the first session in a series of sessions that address codependent behavior. And so what I want to do is, as we move through, first of all, I kind of want to introduce you to what we'll be addressing early on in this course. This course will be an extended course, and so there will be multiple topics addressed. And I'm going to review a few today, but what the first set of series addresses is, first of all, in the first few classes, what we'll cover is, what is codependency in the first place? This is an often misused term. And so what I want to do is address codependency as a whole, and then the more clinical definitions of codependency, so that we can decide, is this even a thing I need to address? Do I have codependency? And we can clarify those rules. We're also today in this video going to get into externalized value. So this is one of the leading causes of codependency, and I'll get into that a little more. But just so that you know, as the course continues, we'll be getting into the 7-year developmental cycles and how those affect codependent behavior. We'll also be talking about social survival versus core survival. Now, a lot of people won't know what this means, but this is kind of integral to my program, which social survival is more based off kind of feeling safe according to the old mechanisms of primal survival, where core survival is moving into something that is purely human. And so I'll get into more of that in the course, and the difference and how that difference can completely eliminate codependent behavior. The other thing we'll talk about is contagion versus codependency. A lot of times our perspective, if we are codependent, has a lot to do with not understanding how contagion actually works in humans. And then some other things we'll be getting into is core value and reflection, as well as some releasing practices. So those are just the first few classes in the course. This course will last several sessions. So this is just kind of where we're going to begin in the first few. And so what I want to begin with today, though, is what is codependency? So today's video is going to cover what is codependency. It is also going to cover this externalized value concept that really addresses codependency. So what I'm going to do today is provide you a clear definition of codependency. I am also going to review the details of externalized value. And this is really because a lot of people who call themselves codependent aren't necessarily specifically codependent. Maybe they have feelings of codependency or been called codependent just because of some externalized value issues. So I am going to review the details of externalized value today, so you can even decide if this is the right course for you. If you are a person who realizes you are not codependent, realizing your true worth would be a more appropriate course for you. So let's go ahead and dig into what is codependency. So to do that, what I want to do is start by really understanding codependency. Like I said, today is going to be really about, do I really understand what codependency means? That begins with asking ourselves the question, am I codependent? And so let's look at the definition of the word codependency. Codependency is defined as excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner, typically a partner who requires support due to an illness or addiction. Support is the prevalent word here. A lot of times being clinging to people or needing people or dependency is classified as codependent. Codependent is not that. It's more addicted to a person who has an addiction or an illness. So it means my life is enmeshed in their life. So you're dependent with someone. So you're basically dealing with a person who has a severe dependency, and you are there to support them and help them because that dependency requires so much of them. So, if you have a person with an addictive pattern in your life that causes dysfunction, and you find yourself in the middle of that dysfunction, or if you have a person with an illness that requires so much of you that it becomes dysfunctional in your life, this would be what you call codependency. And so that clarification is really important, because a lot of people who may be dependent or who may be enmeshed call themselves codependent, but it is not codependency unless the person you're enmeshed with has dependency or an illness that affects your life at a dysfunctional level. So what I really want to talk about is, what is dependency? Because sometimes we have dependency and we call ourselves codependent. So this is where our dependency is tied in to the relationship, but that maybe they don't have those patterns. It begins with survival measured through an externalized source. And I'm going to talk about what that means. And so what it's basically saying, that your brain is saying at that primal level that to survive, I must have this source. So this is where the subconscious mechanisms of our brain are determining that we must survive to have this thing. And this is anything that's external to ourselves. So it could be a relationship. It could be a certain position in society. It could be a certain financial status. So this is, my survival is based on this external thing. And ultimately, we may not realize our survival mechanisms are kicking in because they are working at such a deeply unconscious level. So if you want more information on that, there is a free class I have called Introduction to Brain Chemistry, the Relief of Suffering. And this gets really into those mechanisms. I'm not getting into those mechanisms in this course, but you can take that course in conjunction or on your own at a later date, and it explains a lot. But these survival mechanisms are kicking in based on this specific source. So when it's connected to that externalized source, what the brain is saying that my survival is based off of the value of this externalized source. So this is where we run into problems and where codependency stems. So ultimately, it becomes our value, our internal value as a human being is steeped in an externalized source. So what I want to talk about today is exactly what that means. What does externalized value mean? And this is the key to, like I said, a lot of the issues. So whether it's codependency or whether this is just an issue we have and we're not in a specific codependent relationship, this is what we're going to dig into. So what I want to look at is what it really means to have our value measured in an externalized source. And so what this means is, this is an issue with the majority of the people in our world. This is coming out of that social survival model that came out of primates. And it's not a model we're completely free of yet. And so this is a root to codependency. It's a root to externalized value, is this idea that we measure our value through something that's not within us, something that's external to us. So in talking about externalized value, this may feel like an internal definition. It may feel like something that's within us, but it's based off an externalized source. And so I'm going to get into those now and what those sources really mean. So the first one I want to talk about is validation. Validation is where we count on other people to recognize our value. So when we're being validated by that external source, by that other person. So this can show up like, for example, that my appearance, or like how I look to other people, or that other people think I'm nice, or that other people think I'm funny, or that I'm intelligent. So anytime we need the validation of who we are from the environment around us. So if we don't just inherently feel that regardless of what people say, but we need other people to recognize it. Where their perspective of us is important to us. This is an externalized source of validation. So throughout this course, we're going to review practices designed to strengthen our internal value and not needing that external validation to confirm the value within us. We'll know that value inherently. The second externalized value source is purpose. Now, this is really dangerous with codependency and really tricky. This is where you're thinking helping others is your reason for existence. So you end up sacrificing yourself for other people. This can be really confusing because you can look at people like Mother Teresa and say she wasn't codependent in her behavior. But in this course, we're going to talk about what purpose truly means, because it's not about what you do. Purpose isn't in the action itself. It's in how you perform that action. So, for example, a lot of times if taking care of others drains you, purpose should never drain us or feel like it creates dysfunction in our life. So we're going to talk about how to have purpose that is based off personal expression rather than the outcome, rather than what that expression produces. The other thing we're going to talk about is the externalized value of being needed. This is a value, of course, based in other people needing you. What this does, though, is this always puts pressure on you for having someone need something from you. Because if somebody's not needing something from you, you don't have value. So imagine always being needed, never having a break, no freedom. Before discovering these tools, I spent the majority of my life either dependent or codependent. Most recently, I had to become very aware of codependency with my daughter. And I didn't realize it on a surface level. I just noticed that every time I saw a light at the end of the tunnel, or every time I was going to be out of debt, or I was finally going to do something for myself, she would crash and I would crash with her. Her financial burdens would become my financial burdens. Her emotional burdens would become my emotional burdens. So experiencing things like this tells us that the relationship is codependent because her suffering becomes my suffering. And that's a clear sign of codependency. So in this course, we will go through some practices to free us from this dynamic, practices that will strengthen both our confidence in ourselves and in the other person to be able to manage their life. The next externalized value we discuss is culpability. So this is where we tend to feel responsible for others. This can be really strong with our spouse. It can be strong with our children or even friends if we have really close relationship with friends. The worst part of this is our investment. We invest time, money, and resources, and sometimes the person isn't giving us a return on that investment, and we keep waiting for a return. And then it becomes the more we've invested, the longer we'll wait for a return. And so this is a really difficult one because sometimes we have to walk away experiencing huge loss, and this is a really difficult thing. So this can be one of the hardest patterns to break out of in codependency. But we're going to talk about ways to do that, where we don't even have, again, we're not going to address the pattern. We're not going to address the behavior. We're going to address the brain function. That will alter that pattern so that you can walk away, even if you feel like you're losing something. Another issue with culpability is the pressure of community to be responsible for other humans. And this is really important. A good example of this is the homeless, that we shouldn't walk away from other people and maybe feel them less. And So this can be challenging to stabilize how to be compassionate without sacrificing our own lives or even preventing the person from finding their own strength. It becomes a very confusing topic. So when we address it at a surface level, it can take decades to fully understand it in a way that we can actually make a difference. So what we're going to do in this program is we're going to dig into how to be compassionate and be of service without putting strain on ourselves or feeling overly responsible, and also without disempowering the other person and still helping them find and gain their own strength. Another area of externalized value we face is conformance. So this is represented by the need to fit in, especially in friend groups. So, but it can also apply to the larger society. So this is where we hit that thing where it's not that we expect that we need to behave in a certain way, but we're told by society that you need to be nice, or you need to share. It's like teaching children to share at a young age. It can be really one of these issues. And so this can be a double-edged sword. In the sense that we can end up oversharing, or people sometimes use a right to be themselves or speak their truth as an excuse to be mean. That if we are not sharing and not being nice, then on the other end, we need to be mean, to be strong. But as we can come to understand that kindness can sometimes be silence, not having to speak our truth. It can also be about standing up and speaking our truth, but being able to speak it in a way that causes no harm, that has clarity and centeredness to it, that puts it in a way that other people can receive it. And like I said, this can take decades of training to get to, unless we're utilizing the right brain functions, and then it's relatively easy. So this is where the discussion of boundaries generally comes in, is how do we maintain and keep our boundaries without offending others? And then on the other hand, not worrying about offending others. So you don't need to be thought of as a bad person to have healthy boundaries. And you also don't need to conform because of the opinion of others. So you can see how this conformance can be just really sticky and have a lot of layers to it. So what we're going to talk about in this is clarity. In this course, we're going to talk about how to clearly see what benefits you and everyone involved, so that you can speak in a way that serves others, but also always includes you in that service. The next externalized value we're going to talk about is acceptance. So trying to be accepted is a huge externalized value. This is where we're generally trying to be accepted by a group. Now, we've discussed the pressures of society and not wanting people to dislike us, but this is going to go a little bit deeper when acceptance moves beyond just boundaries. Sometimes if we decide to try and escape the concept of being accepted, it means that we are forced to accept the concept of being excluded. And the human brain hates to be excluded. It can threaten our position in society. And so what I'm talking about in this acceptance piece is kind of what creates the basis for bullying. Codependent people are often bullied by the people we love the most. And the way this happens is the bully might use our fear of rejection or abandonment to try and control us. So being accepted in that relationship kind of sets us up to be controlled. So in this course, we will talk a lot about self-esteem and the powerful shift of moving to a healthy sense of self. And so instead of just settling on, I don't care what people think, this can be a huge shift for some people. They think, well, I don't care what people think. But it's also dismissive of other people. Our compassion inside says we should still care how a person feels, that maybe we don't need to care what they think, but how they feel. And again, this can get muddy. If we can instead exist in a space that says, I care deeply about how you feel and even how you think, but it has no bearing on how I feel or what I think about myself. If we can move into that space, we are in a very powerful space. So we're going to dig into that. The next externalized issue we want to look at is this concept of connection. Now, this can be one of the most important, most significant issues with codependency. Being alone is the single biggest threat to primates. From the primal brain, we will do anything to survive, and to be alone means we're going to die. So losing our connections, the people we love, is the number one issue with codependency. Fear of being alone, of not being enough, of any of the above externalized value issues we talked about. This drives us to the position of being codependent or even dependent in our relationships. I just want to remind you of the tagline. This course is not about learning to separate yourself from others, not about being alone or defiant or independent or disconnected. This course is really about realizing you're more connected to others than you can possibly imagine. We're not going to talk about abandoning anyone. You're not about abandoning others or yourself. This is going to be about understanding what brain functions drive us to be codependent so that we don't have to worry about addressing all these externalized values. We understand that having externalized value is a brain function and that we can adjust that brain function. My experience with codependency left me with a nearly constant feeling of being alone. I felt repeatedly abandoned and betrayed. In fact, I felt more alone with the person in my life that I was codependent with than I did when I was actually alone. So I started to believe that was my choice, that I either had to be alone or had to be in the codependent relationship. And I was terrified of losing them. But even more than that, I was terrified of them losing themselves, that if I wasn't there, that they would be abandoned. And I was so afraid of abandonment myself that I didn't want to abandon anyone else. And so when I created this course, I wanted it to be with a clear understanding that this course is about creating a life where you never need to feel alone again. And you also don't need to be in a position where you're worried that you're potentially causing others to feel alone or abandoned. And doing that through clarity is the most important thing. And so that clarity can come through decades of education, or it can come through shifting to a brain function that is more clear. So if you decide you would like to continue with the course, you can register on our website. The first session is free. It does include some questions for contemplation. And again, we do offer a money-back guarantee. So you can work through the first few classes, and if it's not giving you what you need, you'll get a notice that says, asking you if you want to continue. If you do, you can keep going, but if you don't, you can cancel the course or notify us, and we'll cancel the course and we'll refund your money. However you do decide to move forward, I wish you tremendous success in your journey.